Okay.
So Natela's a phenomenal business attorney, so we thought that we would have her come on and ask her some questions that everyone is wondering. I know that my clients are asking me what they should do, and so I think it's appropriate to have a business attorney so that we can ask all of the questions. We received a lot of questions throughout the week from individuals, so hopefully we'll be able to answer a lot of them and give you guys a lot of vital information. So Natela is a business attorney. Her office is located in Los Angeles, so in the Valley. And I encourage you guys to write down her information in case you need it. I have a lot of client business owners that are joining us today. And so hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions. So I think we should start off letting you guys know that today we're talking about COVID and all of the business grants and business options and loans that are out there available from both public entities as well as private entities, as well as private companies. So it's a good idea to kind of, tune in, I thought, and learn more about it. So Natela, I'm going to kick it over to you so you can introduce yourself. I did a little bit of an intro. Say hi to everyone.
Oh, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Natela Shenon, and thank you, Armine, for having me on. I am a business law attorney. I have a full service business transactions and litigation practice in Sherman Oaks. And over the course of the last month and a half, I've lost track of how long it's been since we've been home. I've sort of become somewhat of an expert in all of the mitigation strategies that are available to business owners during the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders. And I'm going to try and share as much knowledge as I have with you today. So thank you for joining, and hopefully you'll gain some valuable information out of this.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right in and talk about the big elephant in the room, which is this PPP loan that the government has come out with. There's people out there that are angry that they weren't able to get approved for the loan, that the banks ran out of money. So why don't you explain to us what the PPP loan is?
Sure. So the PPP loan, PPP stands for the Paycheck Protection Program. And this Paycheck Protection Program is part of the CARES Act that was recently issued by the government due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And what it's aimed to do is to provide small business owners with relief that will assist them in retaining some of the workforce or all of the workforce that they have for at least a short period of time. I guess they're estimating 8 weeks until businesses are available to open up again and start operating. Although I don't think it's going to happen in 8 weeks personally, if anyone cares for my opinion on that topic. So I actually think that that time frame might get extended. I think that more funding might become available in the future, but don't quote me on it. Those are just my thoughts and feelings. But anyway, so the Payment Protection Program is available through the SBA, but in order to apply, one must go to a bank, a financial institution. And when the program just opened up, I believe it opened up around April 7th. Do you remember exactly, Armine, when they opened it?
I think it was April 3rd that we officially were notified that you can apply.
Right. So around early April, they opened it, and initially it was only available through banks, and most of the time you would have to go to a bank that you had a banking relationship with. Even some banks, for example, Bank of America originally wouldn't even take applicants if they even had a checking or savings account, unless they had a credit card or some sort of a credit line with the bank. And then over the course of the following week or two, more smaller banks, more financial institutions started offering this loan as well. For example, I think now it's also offered through Square and through PayPal. So if you have a bank that does credit card processing and you have a long-standing relationship with either Square or PayPal, it might be a good idea to apply through them. I heard that the turnaround on the end of PayPal and Square is really quick, much faster than traditional banks. I also think that traditional banks have stopped taking new applications. For example, Chase put out an announcement yesterday that they're not going to take any new applications, and they're just going to process what's in queue right now, the people that did not get the first round of funding. So there's a lot to say about the Paycheck Protection Program. I probably could spend an entire hour talking about it, even though a lot of the rules and regulations applicable to that program are still kind of murky. But the main gist of the program is that you basically take your, and we can get into the specifics if people have specific questions, but the main gist of it is that you go back and you look at your payroll for 2019, or if you're a seasonal business, you could take just the time period between, I think maybe February 15th and March 15th, and just base it on that 1 month. If you were not in operations in 2019, you could base it on the month or two that preceded the stay-at-home orders in 2020. And so you take the amount of the payroll itself, the payroll taxes that the employer had to pay on behalf of the employees, any health insurance coverage that the employer pays on behalf of the employees, and any retirement benefits that the employer gives to the employees. And so you take the average of the year basically for a month for 2019, and you multiply that by 2.5, and you have to actually back out any employees that make over $100,000. You don't back out the employees themselves, but you back out the amount that they make over and above the 100,000. And so you come up with whatever sum. And so then you take that sum and you multiply it by 2.5 times. And that gives you the loan amount that presumably you would qualify for. So once you have that amount, you can fill out the application with your bank. From what I understand, I personally did it through Chase for my business, and from what I've heard from other people and other clients who have done it through Bank of America or other financial institutions, it's a really simple application where you basically have to verify and certify that you're a small business, you're the owner, you haven't had any kind of criminal convictions and things of that nature. And then you basically provide this calculation that you did together with supporting documents like your payroll reports or your income tax from the prior year. And then you submit that to the bank and hope for the best. And then the way that you're supposed to use these funds and whether or not they're going to be forgiven is, again, a whole different conversation that could be an additional hour. So, if people have specific questions, we can get into that. But I feel like if I start talking about it now, we're not going to talk about anything else.
And it's going to be based on theory, right? Because we don't really know how they're going to implement the forgiveness portion of it. I feel like they're rolling out the rules as they're going.
We have a general idea, but we don't know precisely. And what's interesting is that I got an email from Chase a couple days ago. You probably got the same email, and they just said, by the way, here's the link to what the SBA has to say about loan forgiveness. It's your responsibility to educate yourself and know how it works. I was like, oh, thanks.
Yeah, it's the onus is on the business owner.
Right. Businesses need to hire a professional to help them with this. I think it depends. I think it depends on how complicated one's, business is, how many employees they have, how complicated their payroll is, whether they need to do this really difficult computation and calculation and maybe an explanation. The application itself is not very difficult. I don't know that a business owner would need to hire a professional to help them with the PPP application itself. What I think might behoove some business owners is to hire someone to consult with on how to properly allocate and spend the funds and what might or might not be forgivable. And it's still what it might be. We don't know 100%, right? But back in law school, which was a very long time ago, when I didn't know the precise answer to something, I sort of always fell back on, well, what does my logic tell me, right? Because these laws, these rules, these regulations, they're here for a reason, right? Just the same thing as the PPP, there's a reason for why there's a PPP and it's being given to business owners. So I think that without knowing precisely to the T what the regulation is going to end up being once it's black and white, and it will be black and white at some point, I think, when we get closer to when forgiveness is going to have to, be evaluated, I think we just have to fall back on sort of logic and the public policy of why this program was put in place to begin with. I mean, obviously the easiest thing is you just take the entire amount. You can use 25% of what you got for rent, utilities, mortgage payments, and things like that. And the rest you just spend on payroll. But there are businesses that have more complicated situations. For example, maybe they just don't need all of their employees full time for these 8 weeks. For example, if you're a restaurant and you're operating sort of part time because you're doing takeout, and you had a lot more employees prior to shutting down, it might not make sense for you to spend the entire amount of this PPP to just payroll everyone, waiters, for example, that are not serving people anymore and that are not even working at the restaurant. It might be wiser for you to say, okay, well, maybe I'm going to qualify for partial forgiveness by paying the people that I have that are doing takeout, and the rest of the money I'm just going to hold on to. I will use it for payroll eventually, but I'm not going to do it today. I'm going to do it 8 weeks from now when I can reopen. Because if I pay the entire amount out to all of my employees now, what am I going to be left with 8 weeks from now when it's actually time to reopen and I don't have any funds left for, it's almost like a startup expense because you're starting over. So I think that's where some professional help might come in and sort of doing this assessment and doing this evaluation. And I think that, my gut tells me as they change these regulations, they might take that into account. They might understand that this is the logic behind some businesses, and maybe they're keeping some of their staff on full time and leaving the rest for later. Might be some more leniency beyond the 8 weeks. I think there will be, but don't quote me on it.
So with that said, if a business doesn't end up using the entire amount, can they give it back, or does it just automatically turn into a
loan?
SBA loan, a standard SBA loan at 1% due in 2 years?
I believe that they can give it back anytime. There's not a prepayment penalty. If they choose not to give it back, they can always use it on payroll later on over the course of these 2 years. And then, because that's an appropriate use of these funds, and then it will turn into an SBA loan at 1% interest. And interest is deferred for the first 6 months. Interest accrues from inception, but any kind of payments are deferred for the first 6 months. And then it's going to become due after 2 years. So no, yes, you can pay it back anytime you want if you end up not using it. I'm sure.
And the interest rate we know is at 1%.
So it's good to hear that, if they don't use it all, it can actually be converted to a standard SBA with a super low interest rate. I don't know why you wouldn't want that for 1%.
I think everyone should hold on to it. I mean, you're going to have a payroll over the course of these 2 years.
Right. So, and your opinion is that they're going to extend that June 30th deadline, that it's not going to be just for the 8 weeks. It's going to be expanded somehow.
I think so because they're going to, well, first of all, a lot of people are getting these funds later than anticipated.
Right.
They started on April 3rd, then they ran out of money. Then just today, more funding came out. So by the time that rolls out and other businesses actually get funded, they might be into mid-May.
Yeah, I think you're right.
June 30th is not really, it's 8 weeks from when you get the funds. So it doesn't necessarily have to be June 30th. The June 30th date is in there because they're saying that if you've let anyone go, in order to
hire back,
you have to hire them back. It's a really odd calculation that they're doing. I don't know. I've seen some of these Excel worksheets that came out by some financial institutions where they have sort of a formula where there's a reduction in the forgivable amount that's based on how many employees you've retained versus how, if you've reduced them from full-time to part-time.
Right.
It's very, very muddy right now. It really is. But I think that given the fact,
I agree with you before you said, I think they're going to fall back on basic logic. And if you can prove up your use of the funds for the original legislative intent, which was to help retain employees, I think there's going to be leniency with forgiveness.
I agree.
Yeah. We have a question. How long does it take for the loan to process?
I think that depends on the financial institution that you are applying with. I think that smaller banks, from what I've heard, have a quicker turnaround time. I think that they were slower to start, but for whatever reason, people have an easier time getting the money quicker, maybe because less applicants than to the major banks. I want to say probably from what I've seen and from what I've heard from other people, on average, from start to finish, 2 weeks-ish. Would you agree with that, Armine?
From the application date?
To funding.
Yes.
2 weeks-ish, right?
Although I did have a client who applied through PayPal around midnight.
Right.
And around midnight she applied and she received the funds in her account at 11 a.m. that same day.
Yeah, so that's why I said if you're a business that takes credit cards and you do any kind of processing or PayPal through Square or through PayPal, it might be worthwhile to apply. It also might be worthwhile to apply through several channels and just see which one gets approved first. I think that once the SBA gets your application and they approve it, they issue you some sort of a number. And so your tax ID is already reflected in their system. So you can't double dip even if you wanted to. So I don't think there's really any harm in trying to apply through perhaps a variety of different sources and then just seeing which one pans out first. And I think that people should right now, because a lot of financial institutions stop taking applications. So those of you who are yet to apply, do it as soon as possible. Like wake up tomorrow morning and the first thing you should do is just apply.
Stop watching us and go apply.
Well, yeah, if you can do it now, it's more worthwhile.
Listen to all of our advice and then go apply.
For sure.
Yeah, I think the smaller banks jumped on it quicker. The client that I referenced who received it same day, received it a day before the money ran out.
Okay. Lucky.
So I think that's important to know. And I think Senate passed their portion of the law and it's waiting for the president's signature for the second round of funding. So you all should definitely go apply. So I have another question here. Can you talk about who qualifies for PPP? What type of business information is asked for?
Yes. So you have to be a small business under 500 employees. And as the business owner, they ask you on the application a variety of questions of, criminal convictions and things of that nature in the recent past. So you have to have a clean criminal record. I also think that towards the tail end of when the funds were available, they opened it up to also in self-employed individuals and those on 1099. And I think that process started, but then it was halted because the funds ran out. So I assume that these people can start all over again. And then in terms of the kinds of information that you need to provide, they really are looking for anything that's official, that reflects your payroll or your 1099 payments or whatever you were paying yourself in the prior year. So it could be a tax return, it could be the IRS 940 reports or 941 reports, or anything that's certified by your payroll company. They really give a lot of options. Like Chase gave a lot of options as to what you could provide to support your numbers. But the numbers have to be very precise. You can't just kind of round it up and just guesstimate. They have to be exact, and whatever supporting documents that you're providing, they have to match. Otherwise, your application is going to get declined and you probably won't get a chance to reapply just because all this is moving so fast.
So if someone doesn't have consistency, what do you recommend they do when they're applying and uploading documents?
I would recommend that, for example, I had a client that had payroll in 2019, but this particular business didn't start payroll, didn't have employees until the later part of the year. So they only had 2 quarterly reports, Q3 and Q4. So, that's kind of a little confusing, because what you would do in that situation is that you would take those 6 months and your average, you would take the sum that you paid over the course of these 6 months, and then you would divide it by 6 versus dividing it by 12 as you would for the entire year. And to these underwriters at these banks that are seeing probably tens of thousands of these applications, want to make it very, very easy for them to understand your math and why you came to the number that you came to. So if you have something complicated or some sort of an anomaly, if it's not just a straightforward 12-month average or a tax return, then I would recommend writing just a brief explanation of how you arrived at your number, converting it into a PDF, and then uploading it together with your supporting documents.
Just your own document called explanation of payroll.
Yeah, just payroll cost calculation.
Awesome. I think we covered a lot of the questions related to PPP. We received a question about whether or not EIDL will be reinitiated.
Well, I suppose the first question is, was it initiated to begin with? Right? So, I probably know of maybe 2 people out of very many that I have spoken to over the course of these last couple months that have applied, that have actually, whose application actually moved somewhere. They've been reached out to, they're being asked questions, they received the initial advance that they first promised that, as soon as you apply within 3 days, you get $10,000 and it's forgivable regardless of whether or not you actually qualify for the loan. Then that got changed to, oh no, you only get $1,000 per employee. So now rumor has it, they just completely ran out of money. The loans are going to be capped at $15,000. I don't know whether that's true or not, given the fact that, these loans are supposed to go up to 2 million. I do know that they are no longer taking any new applications. That's right there on the SBA website. But they just also increased the funding for that as well. I think they're getting an extra 60 billion. So I don't know if this money that's coming through is going to be used to fulfill the applicants that have already come in because they're so short on funds, or if this money, or maybe a part of it, is going to be used to open it back up. I think we just have to watch it closely and see what happens. I would be inclined to think that even if this 60 billion is not going to cover new applicants, perhaps a little bit later in the future, they might give more funding, because it's just simply not enough for how much need there is.
So for those of you joining us now, we're discussing the PPP SBA program as well as the EIDL program. And Natela is a business attorney, and she's giving us the scoop on what her opinion is and what business owners should do. Is there a way that you think that EIDL, a business who has received EIDL, that amount will actually impact the amount that's forgiven for PPP? Because on the PPP application, it asks you, right? It says, have you received disaster relief loans?
Right. So I think that it depends. There is no harm in getting both, and they have similar purposes. But I think that EIDL is broader. So, where the payment protection program can only be used essentially for payroll, and only like a tiny piece of it can be used for other things. And only, don't forget, it's only 8 weeks worth in theory, right? The EIDL could be used for other general business operating expenses other than just, utilities and rent and payroll. Plus, PPP is just not enough. Right. So I think that if you use the PPP for the payroll as you're supposed to, and then you get the EIDL, and that just covers a longer period of time for you to be able to continue your operations, and covers other rent, utilities, whatever other operating expenses you might have. I think under that scenario, the PPP would still be forgiven and you could still take advantage of the EIDL. I think it just depends on your particular circumstance.
So we have a comment. The business.
I want to note that For those of you who have already gotten the PPP funds, I think it's just very, very important to document everything properly. So just be very mindful that you got this money, and every time you're spending it on payroll or your rent or whatever, just make sure that it's documented properly. And so, because you are going to have to do a prove up in order for it to be forgiven. We don't know what it's going to look like. It might be a very simple process, just the same as the application itself, and you just have to attest to something and give a simple document proving it, or it might be something that's more complicated. So it's prudent.
I agree with that 100%. And it is going to make it difficult to do that because they're just dumping the money into whatever operating account you have. Right. So I guess really make sure you don't go into the negative.
Right, but it doesn't really matter where the money sits, right? Because you still have to pay your bill. It's not even so much the particular money that came in. It's more just be mindful of, okay, so I have to spend X amount, whatever you got for the PPP, for payroll and healthcare and rent and whatever. So when you're spending money on these things in the course of the next 8 weeks, just make sure everything is documented well and properly, and you have receipts and invoices, and you know your agreement with your landlord. If you're paying rent, make sure that that was in place prior to February 15th, and you know the copy that you have is signed by everyone. You know, sometimes that becomes an issue. So it's more about being mindful of just good record keeping, in my opinion.
I agree 100%. We have a comment. It says, the city closed my business over a month and I applied for an SBA loan on the website. So it's the EIDL. What do you think? Am I able to get anything?
When did you apply?
So Arsene, tell us when you applied. Maybe, I think if you were one of the early comers, again, they've released more funding. So there may be a chance that you might get something, but it will be limited to the number of employees that you have. So that original 10,000 is not what they're distributing. To be fair to everyone, they're giving you $1,000 per W-2 employee that you had in the 2019 year. So if you had 4 employees, you'll get 4,000.
Well, not to encourage anyone to be dishonest by any means, but I just wanted to make a note that they do not ask for an ounce of documentation to support how many employees you had. So I don't know if there's a, you know, some way that they have on the back end to check, because they are the SBA and you do give them your tax ID, but there isn't anything that they require to go along with the application itself to prove the number of employees that you're listing.
And then there's another question. Can you use PPP money to pay for sick leave and vacation?
Yes, you can. That's considered part of payroll.
So the one thing I want to note you can't use the PPP loan for is the federal taxes that you're paying as the employer on each of your employees. So when you're doing your calculations, make sure not to include that. The IRS is not going to pay itself what you owe on your employees, basically the logic behind it. So those were the questions off of Facebook. Let me see what other questions. Did we discuss whether or not independent contractors can apply for PPP?
We made mention of it, yes, and they can now.
Good. So I would encourage all of you to reach out to the bank that you currently have your business account with, apply for the program, and then simultaneously find yourself another bank or financial institution that is willing to take you on. I was speaking to one of my colleagues at First Citizens Bank, and he said that they are actually looking into new relationships with new business clients. So they are opening up their program to new people coming in, which is a restriction that I know Wells Fargo had, Chase had, and Bank of America had. So we have a comment. Lendistry.com has beefed up operations for PPP loan, says Laura Morgan. I'm guessing that's a lending website that people can use. So check that out. We covered a lot of the questions I had, and we want to reiterate the interest loan is 1%. So if you get, you know, 25,000, that's literally nothing that you're paying.
Practically free money.
It's practically free money. So do not give it back if you get it. Don't be like, what's that company that gave it back?
Oh, Shake
the
Shack.
burger. Shake Shack gave it back to save face.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about very briefly just the EIDL and what you get and the terms and things like that?
I think we did, right? You get the number of employees you have.
Well, but that's not all you get, though.
Right.
That's
Yeah, go for it. Give them the other details.
right. So that's just the beginning, and then you get a loan. But what's interesting is that I have not been able to really, at least not through the SBA website, educate myself on how they come up with a number to offer you. It says that it's based on the losses that you've suffered due to the disaster, but how do you calculate that? Because the losses are ongoing and nobody knows when the ending point is going to be. So we do know that it's up to 2 million. We do know that, again, it's for businesses that have 500 employees or less. We do know that it's going to be potentially a 30-year loan. And we do know that for-profit companies are going to have it with a 3.5% interest. What still remains a bit of a mystery to me is how they figure out what amount to offer you as a loan. Another thing that we know is that I believe it's either under 200,000 or under 250,000. A personal guarantee is not required, and anything above that, you are going to have to personally guarantee it. So, how they're going to come up with the amount to offer you, I suppose, remains to be seen, unless they really are so short on cash that they're just going to be giving people $15,000, which is really not going to go a very long way for many businesses, unfortunately. They're almost better off really capping it at the number of businesses and giving them more money than spreading it out across hundreds of businesses and giving each one $15,000, because they're not going to save anyone with just $15,000. So let's hope it's just a rumor.
Right. So I want to note for property owners that hold ownership of their property in an entity like an LLC, do you think it's a good idea for them to apply for the EIDL?
Absolutely. I don't see why not.
They've lost rent.
Absolutely, 100%.
What about the PPP program?
Well, but that depends. Did they
if they pay themselves payroll
through payroll or even as a 1099 for property management? Then absolutely, they should try to take advantage of as many programs as there are out there, and just see which one pans out. Maybe all of them will. That'd be great.
So if you guys are property owners and you hold ownership of your property in a limited liability company, you should definitely be applying for this EIDL program if you lost rental income. And if you also have been issuing 1099s to yourself, as Natela mentioned, go ahead and apply for that PPP as well. So we have a question. It says, is there another loan, they say, from SBA that is 3% for up to 2 million? I believe that's the EIDL that Natela just described.
I think it's 3.5 though, but sounds like that's what it is. There's another loan program that they have. It's called an express bridge loan. And I think with that one, you only get 35,000. I don't know too much more about it, but I do know that it's out there.
And I also want to let people know there are other programs privately that are being released by private companies like Facebook. Well, they're a public company, but they're going out of their way to help the public and provide grants. So keep your ears open for the different programs that are coming out. Also
local governments too. They have programs coming out.
Yeah, didn't the city of LA have one?
I believe so. I believe they do.
Do you know what it was called?
I don't recall off the top of my head, but
I think you guys should just Google grant, business grant,
right,
and see what comes up in your local area.
Right.
Right, and just apply, because you never know what you're gonna get. I know a lot of people were complaining about these big multi-million dollar corporations swooping in and taking all the PPP money because they had insiders at the banks and they knew about the programs and they had all their documents ready. You guys need to put your ear out there and learn and find out information. Natela and I text and call and talk almost daily about all the different programs that are available. What are your clients doing? What are my clients doing? And we're just sharing information back and forth as much as we can. Talk to your accountants and your CPAs. They are keeping a very close eye on the law changes. And then call your lawyers. Okay,
well, I was just going to make a comment about what you said. I know there are a couple of lawsuits actually that are currently pending against Wells Fargo and Chase, and I think Bank of America, because they're saying that they wanted to fund these big companies to give them more money, to make more money. And the interesting thing is that they actually made more money on the smaller loans. So the higher the amount was, the less money the bank would make on the loan. So if you're mad at the big bad companies that got millions of dollars to your detriment, and you think that the bank had something to do with it because they wanted to make more money, that is not the case. They actually made less money on the bigger loans. Anything over $1 million made the least amount of money for the bank.
Well, okay, so fun fact. So calm down, everyone. Let's talk about, by the way, everyone, I think we mentioned this, but they've released, or they are going to release, hopefully in the next couple of days, more funds. So Senate signed the second funding portion of it, and it's sitting on Trump's desk for his signature. So once that's released, the banks will again start giving out loans. My experience from different clients has been that once you get that approval from companies like Chase and Bank of America, the money is funded into your account almost within 24 hours.
They say within 3 days.
Yeah. I know that has been our experience with Chase. It's been within 24 hours of funding.
Right.
So that's great. But yeah, I don't think it's too late. I think you should still apply. The application takes so little time that it's worth it to apply.
Well, you know what else I find kind of curious, I suppose, because I'm an attorney, this is presumably we signed some sort of a promissory note to pay this money back when we applied, right? That terms. Where's our copy?
I know.
And they don't give you anything back. They just
know, it's crazy.
Our account, and then that's it.
So let's jump in. For the business owners, I know we're getting a lot of questions about paying their rent. The city shut them down and they can't operate, but they're still expected to pay their landlord. What kind of suggestions or recommendations do you have for paying their rent?
Well, first of all, there was an ordinance that came out a couple of weeks ago for commercial landlords and tenants that basically said that if a commercial tenant has suffered business loss, and practically everybody has, due to the pandemic, then they have to give notice of same, obviously, to their landlord, and I don't know, maybe some supporting documentation that has not been described in detail. And then they can actually stop paying rent until the safer at home orders are lifted. And so once these orders are lifted, then they have 3 months thereafter to repay whatever amounts are outstanding and due during this time that they have not been paying. I think that, that's nice, but I think that it's very problematic because those businesses that end up reopening a month from now, there's no way they're going to recoup the money that they lost within 3 months to be able to continue paying rent and also pay back the amounts that they've missed. So, hopefully someone's going to do something about that. I don't know, but I think that tenants should be proactive and they should proactively try to renegotiate with their landlords now, not wait until they go back, not wait until it's due, try to renegotiate now. And I think that a good way of doing that is to say, maybe you can afford to make partial payments, although you don't have to make any if you've suffered business income loss. But if you can make some, then that might give you some leverage to renegotiate your lease altogether, to say, hey, landlord, I know you need the money. I can come up with partial payments if we can renegotiate our arrangement. And maybe instead of me having to pay you this lump sum in 3 months, can you maybe take this amount and spread it over the remainder of my of the term of my lease? That's another 3 years. So it's much, much easier to have to pay, say, I don't know, an extra $500 a month than to have to come up with $25,000, $30,000 all at once 3 months from now when your business is barely getting off the ground. Again, so there are a lot of different strategies of how to deal with it. And then, of course, you know, the first thing that you should do is look at your commercial lease agreement and see if there are any kind of force majeure provisions in there that might allow you to just not pay the rent while you're not able to work out of your office or be in your.
Natela, can you explain to everyone what a force majeure concept is in the legal world so that people who don't speak legalese know what it is?
The very basic gist of what it means is that if something happens that is outside of your control, like the situation that is happening right now, and because of that, you cannot perform your end of the bargain on the lease agreement, then basically you are forgiven and you don't have to pay the rent at all if you have a provision like that in your contract. So I would most certainly look at that. You know, some people signed their lease agreements years ago. Some people have been in the same office for like 10 years. They don't even know what they signed because they haven't looked at it in God knows how long, and it's old and dusty and sitting somewhere in their drawer. But you might be one of the lucky ones that might have a provision like that in there, and that might really help you. So I encourage you to take a look.
I was going to use the example of a contract to buy a house and the house burns down.
Right.
As a buyer, there's a force majeure that takes you off the hook because there's nothing to buy anymore. So it's that concept. So you can't perform your end of it because the other side or some other godly act. I remember reading godly act.
Yeah, it is. It's a godly act.
It's a godly act. So something happened, lightning struck, and you couldn't finish performing.
Right.
So do you think that there's going to be some sort of bailout for landlords and the amounts that they haven't been able to collect are going to be wiped out?
I think so. I think so. I think there's going to be a bailout for everyone. I think there's going to be a bailout for tenants, and I think there's going to be a bailout for landlords too. And then I think there's going to be a bailout for the banks or the lenders that hold the mortgages on these properties. And what happens thereafter, I don't know. I haven't gone so far, but I do think there's going to be some sort of a bailout. That's why I say that if you've been affected, you might want to hold on to the funds that you would otherwise pay for rent, because you know you might be paying it for the next 2 months, and then you know the government's going to come out and say, hey, guess what, you know whatever you didn't pay could be forgiven, and so then that means that you've wasted this money. So if you have been affected and you could pay, but you could also maybe use these funds somewhere else, maybe to restructure your business, maybe to come out with another, you know, product line that's more fitting to the current circumstance, I would probably encourage you to hold on to that money for other things and just hold off on the rent. And then, you know, if you have to pay it, you'll pay it, but there's a chance that you might not have to pay it. So, you know,
put the money aside that you would have otherwise spent.
And just hold on to it, because, you know, it's kind of a weird thing to say, right? Because I don't want to offend anyone that's a landlord, right? But landlords are also being not forgiven, but they're getting a forbearance from their mortgage lenders as well. So it's not like you're not paying your landlord and your landlord is defaulting on their loan and going into foreclosure. The mortgage companies are working with the landlords, and just the same, you know, forbearance that you're getting, the landlords are getting as well. So there's really no harm in holding off the payment and waiting to see what happens.
I like that advice. I think it's sensible, because at this point we don't know exactly what type of other bailouts they're going to roll out for everyone else down and up the financial food chain.
And I think there will be others, because, you know, when they originally came out with the PPP and this ordinance and the EIDL, everyone thought that, you know, everything was going to reopen in a month. I don't know that that's going to be the case now. And even if things do start to reopen, it's never going to be the same, not for a while. So restaurants are not going to be able to have customers at the same capacity. There's not going to be, large entertainment venues. So it's going to take a long time, I think, for things to get back to normal and for the economy to really recover. And I think that because it's now becoming more clear, there will likely be other programs that are going to be made available to small businesses so they can just kind of float and wait it out and not go bankrupt essentially in this time period.
I think that's really sensible advice for all of you that have lease payments and rent payments to be paying on the business location that you're renting. So how do they do that? Do they just call up their landlord?
I would write a letter because you want to have it documented. You want to have it documented. So I would write a letter. Oh my God, now I'm echoing. Am I echoing?
Are you echoing?
No, not anymore. I think it's because
no. So I want to make sure that we get a point across. Natela and I are both attorneys. We are not giving any of you legal advice on exactly what to do for your particular situation. We're just here having a discussion and hoping that our discussion helps you in some way. But I want to reiterate that we are not providing legal advice. And to the people that are joining us on Instagram, it will shut off in a few minutes and we will not be coming back live on Instagram. So you can hop on over to Facebook to listen to the rest of the discussion without audio problems. So what were you saying? How can they actually get I was saying
I think they should document it. I think they should write a letter and just say that my business does this and this, and I've been financially affected, and this is how. If they have proof, it's really difficult to give proof of that right now because it's only been a minute. So what do you show? You don't have financials for 2020. 2020 just started. I mean, maybe you could show some sort of cash flow discrepancy between what was happening in the very beginning of the year and what's happening now. So I would just make sure that it's documented because, there will still be landlords out there that are going to try to use force and power to collect these funds. So it's possible that they might send you some sort of a notice and they might try to start eviction proceedings. And so if they do that, then you are going to be able to use that as evidence as a defense. They are not going to be able to evict you. They're going to give you a big headache, but they're not going to be able to kick you out. But then another point I was going to make is that for those business owners or those businesses that also have some sort of equipment or machinery that they are leasing, or even vehicles, trucks, or anything like that, I think that most companies are offering some type of a forbearance right now. So if you have, if you're renting expensive equipment and you're paying something on a monthly basis, I encourage you to, at the very least, to call and ask the company that you're leasing from what they can offer you to help you out in the meantime. And my bet is that no one's going to say nothing.
So I have a question along those lines. Can you explain to everyone what a forbearance means in the legal world?
Right. So what that means is that whatever amount you would have had to have been paying, let's say for your office lease, these amounts you still have to pay. They don't disappear. They're not forgiven. They don't evaporate. But what happens is that it's just sort of like a pause. You just don't have to pay them for a certain period of time. And then once that time period lapses, then you have to repay them. So that's essentially what a forbearance means.
And what's the difference between a forbearance and a loan forgiveness? I think you touched on it, but just to be clear.
So loan forgiveness basically means that if you owe it a loan, you don't owe it anymore. It's forgiven. And a forbearance just basically means that you still have to pay these amounts back. You just do it at a later time. And then another thing to mention in terms of commercial leases, your landlords cannot charge you any type of interest or any type of penalties for the amounts that are in forbearance during this time period. So that's not something you need to worry about. So if they try to impose interest or penalties, tell them that they can't.
Sue them.
Yeah, sue them.
Call Natela and she will happily sue them.
I won't sue them. I'll just talk to them.
So I have some other questions, but if you guys are joining in, we're talking about the different options and the different programs that are available to everybody that is a business owner, small businesses, mid-sized businesses. We've been talking about different terminology so that when the landlord throws around the word forbearance, you don't think that he's just going to forgive all the amounts that are due. You're still going to have to pay it, just at a later date. So what is a typical forbearance period? Let's say you call up your landlord and say, hey, my business is not operating. Let me pay half of it, whatnot. You negotiate and he says, fine, you don't have to pay because that's what the law says. So it's not really negotiating. What's a typical period, or what should people be asking for?
Well, people should be asking for as long as possible, right? Because you want to give yourself time to sort of gather your financial strength after you reopen. The ordinance says that you don't have to pay anything until the stay-at-home order is lifted, and then you have to start paying. And then whatever amounts accumulated during that time period, you've got 3 months to repay those. But I'd be asking for 6 at a minimum. Honestly, you know what? I wouldn't be asking for anything right now. I would just go with what the ordinance says, because we don't know what the future holds. We don't know if we're going to be in this situation for, until the new year. So you don't want to negotiate something now that's going to be unfavorable to you a month from now. I mean, I suppose you could renegotiate it again, but I think that you should just stick with what, the ordinance says. And then as we get closer to the reopening, that's when you start negotiating, because we don't know when that's going to be. Could be a month from now, could be 6 months from now. So, you don't want to negotiate and sign an amendment to your lease that says that, okay, you don't have to pay for 3 months and then you have to start paying if you actually can't go back to your office for 6 months, right? Because then 3 months from now, you're on the hook to pay again. So I would just go with the ordinance and just sit tight and wait to negotiate. Unless you're renegotiating to start paying 6 months from now, and it's actually cheaper per month, significantly cheaper than what you have been paying, then that might be worth it to you.
Very nice. We had a question: what determines the type of forbearance I get? I'm trying to understand what that means.
Maybe duration?
Maybe duration or their existing term. So if you have only like 6 months left on your lease, then you kind of have maybe a little bit of a better advantage, and you can get a better forbearance. I'm not sure what that question means. Whoever asked it, if you can clarify, that would be great. What is loss mitigation, Natela?
Well, it's a loaded question. It could mean a million different things. But basically, it just means that you are in a bad situation, like most businesses are now. And so you can't fix it and you can't make it better. So you basically now turn to the alternative, which is, how do I make it less bad? That's what loss mitigation basically is. So you try to figure out how to minimize your business income losses rather than figuring out how to bring your business back to normal, because that's just not going to happen.
And what are some loss mitigation options for people? I know it depends on the different industries, but what are some things that business owners can do? Like the most basic that applies to most businesses across the board, which is obviously their rent. Right. But what other options do they have?
It depends. It really just depends on the business. You have to, I do this with a lot of my clients where I sit down with them, on Zoom, and we look at each other and I say, okay, well, talk to me. What are your expenses? What are you spending money on, right? Who are your employees? Who's critical to your operation? Whose hours can you cut? Whose salary can you reduce? What payments can you do away with for now? Like there might be things that people don't even think about, like parking, for example, right? Like we all pay for parking on a monthly basis, but like nobody needs parking right now because no one's going to the office and no one's parking, and then also vendors. Call your vendors and just negotiate with them. Tell them my business is struggling, I'm having a hard time. If you're paying them for some sort of a software or whatever on a monthly basis, just negotiate with everyone. Ask everyone to give you breaks, and they will. They'd much rather give you a break than lose your business. So these are all part of loss mitigation strategies.
And can they do that on their own, or do you think it's wiser to actually strategize and get an attorney on board to help them so that the other side, or they seem scarier to the people that they're negotiating with?
I think it just depends. I think that, sometimes there are very, very sophisticated business owners who are heavily involved with the finances of their business. They have read every single contract, and then there are those that are they're incredible, entrepreneurs, and they're deal makers, and they're not as heavily involved in sort of the financial aspects of their business. And, those are the ones that probably could benefit from an attorney or some other advisor who can help them get all their ducks in a row.
Awesome. Is this something you do, by the way?
Yes, all the time.
Okay, awesome. Okay, good. So does engaging in one of these renegotiations and newer contracts or forbearance or any of the loss mitigation options, does it affect or impact the credit of the business owner? I know that a lot of people are operating through corporations and LLCs. They might be sole proprietors. I'm just wondering if the other side will be putting kind of a ticker on their credit report for a late payment when in fact it's a forbearance.
No, absolutely not. In fact, I've renegotiated. I have a client that's a trucking company.
Mm-hmm.
They have a bunch of these leased trucks, and we renegotiated. We got a forbearance on the payments, and it will not. And the individual client, the business owner, is a guarantor on all the leases, and it will not in any way, shape, or form affect their credit. So
in that particular case, are they paying all of the forbearance amounts that were not paid in these next couple of months?
No,
assuming this goes at the end.
We negotiated an interesting deal.
Tell us about it, because I think it'll help people to understand in a conceptual setting, in an actual tangible story, what it's like.
For the next 4 months.
Okay.
And they have to make up the payments that they aren't making at any point prior to the basically expiration of their loan with the finance company. So, if it's 2 years from now, it has to be before the end of those 2 years, and there's no interest that they're imposing on these amounts. So it's actually a pretty good deal. So they still have to pay it back, but it doesn't have to be in 3 months. It could be in 3 months if they can afford it, but it could also be in 2 years, which is kind of nice because it gives people the opportunity to accumulate some funds over time once they start operating.
That's awesome. So the best way to do it is obviously through an attorney, but obviously if your business is suffering and you don't have the funds to hire an attorney, you yourself can actually appeal to whatever company it is that you're working with and ask for some sort of forbearance. And then make sure it's memorialized, make sure it's in writing. So if you get that lease forbearance on the automobiles that your construction company is leasing, make sure that they send you something in writing that says, we will not expect you to pay, so that you're protected.
I think that it might behoove actually business owners to get an attorney involved when renegotiating or even giving notice of this forbearance to a landlord. I've seen a lot of landlords, they basically start to bully the tenants because they think that they're lay people and they don't know. So they start imposing all kinds of restrictions on them and telling them that they have to give them their financial history for the business and their personal stuff over the course of the last 3 years. And they make it very, very stressful when really all you have to do is just say, I've suffered, I can't afford it, I'm sorry. And there's nothing they can do to you. So I think that maybe when that type of a notice comes from an attorney, it's the conversation changes with the landlord.
Yeah, I would think that a simple letter can go so far in this context. Are the lease forbearance options and rules different for different cities? I know that City of Glendale has different rules. City of Los Angeles has their own landlord-tenant rules.
Is a county-wide ordinance, the one that I'm talking about. So I don't know. I don't know if the cities maybe have their own that are broader, perhaps, than this one. I don't know, maybe some cities said, you know what, we want to protect our businesses and our people, and the county says 3 months, but we're going to say 6.
Gotcha.
I have not seen one like that, but it's possible that they're out there.
Good to know. Are there any other war stories that you can share with us that will give people and business owners hope? I know that this will be over and we'll all be back to our normal course of business, and most will hopefully survive the economic punch in the gut. But do you have any, hopeful stories of businesses that are adjusting in some way to make it work?
They're not my hopeful stories. I mean, look around, look on Facebook, look on Instagram, look at what restaurants are doing. They're turning into grocery stores and supermarkets, and they're delivering all these cool kits that people can cook at home. Look at, my kids' art school is delivering these really cool art kits. Their karate school is doing karate via
Zoom.
Exactly. We're meeting with clients via Zoom and giving virtual consultations. I think that I think we're very adaptable. I think that it's just a matter of leaning into the situation and figuring out, how can my business thrive in a time like this, and what can I offer to my customers that I used to perhaps one day see in person while they're at home. There's a little kids store that my kids used to love, and we used to always go there. That's obviously not operating now, but the owner is amazing, and she's a fighter, and she posts so much stuff on Instagram, and there's all these cute bathing suits now that it's hot, and then she'll deliver it to you. She'll deliver it to your house rather than picking up and shutting down. People are doing things like that. So I think that in and of itself should give people hope.
So I think this is somewhat of a business evolution that's happening, right? And we talked about this, where the really creative business owners, the ones that think outside the box, will find a way to survive. Right. They will gain information, they will pivot and shift, right, which is what you should be doing anyway, but in a more serious way, and be creative and find ways to make your business work. I know that that's easier for some, like professionals. We can just grab our computers and go and work from home and do Zoom meetings. It's obviously a little bit more harder for mechanics and other professionals out there that are physically doing work that they're prohibited from doing. So I think it's a really great opportunity to sit down and kind of reevaluate and reorganize and look at your operations as a whole and see how you can streamline things. I know that I've made a lot of changes, and I'm sure you have too, that I'm going to be keeping after this is all over, that have been working out really great. So why not keep it, move it forward? So do you have any other tips for business owners that we haven't covered? I'm all out of questions.
Oh, God.
We've covered this many questions, by the way, believe it or not.
Tips. Just stay informed.
Breathe. Mm-hmm.
Breathe. Stay calm. Stay informed. And don't lose hope. Like Armine said, I think that I agree with you. I think that those that are going to adapt and readjust are those that are going to thrive. And there's a lot to thrive on right now. It's a whole new world. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, my skincare facialist lady, whom I love and is amazing, obviously can't give facials now, right? So she came up with these facial kits that you can order from her, and then she'll give you instructions on how to give yourself a facial, so it's things like that. I think that it's that type of creativity that is going to help people thrive. So just think about how, whatever service or product you were offering to your customers, just think about how to tweak it to make it either virtual or to be able to get it delivered to your customers' homes, and then you should be okay.
I like that. That's something that particular person can keep on once everything goes back to normal, go back to offering the services she was offering in person, and have an extra side business that she never realized she can take the opportunities from.
Or if you're not suffering financially, even though your business is closed, and you're taking this time to just, I don't know, learn a new language and learn how to play the piano and bake banana bread, I also think it's a really good time for branding. because you also don't want people to forget about who you are and what you were offering. So I think that it's important to have a presence on social media and to just keep promoting your brand. Maybe, you know, if you really are not struggling financially, maybe see what you can do to help others who are, and just really keep getting your name out there so that, you know, once you do reopen, people are going to be like, oh, okay, I know them. So that's another tip, I suppose.
I think that's a great idea. I think for all the business owners that think, oh my goodness, how am I going to become digitized, or what's something creative that I can do? Call me. Natela and I will brainstorm.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if you're a mechanic, you can just post, you know, short videos of how to check your oil or something that people find useful. And if you can convey information to the public in a genuine way, without asking for anything back, just like we're doing today, right? Our purpose and our point today was to make sure that we can get the information from our minds onto the screen so that those of you who don't have resources the way that me and Natela might have the same access to information. So if you're a mechanic and you don't know what to do, it's like put up a little video about, you know, how to know if your tire needs air, or just basic information, because the next generation is coming up on social media, and they are not, you know, they are to do DIYers. They will try to do it themselves, right? And if you can convey information that helps them, they will forever be grateful to you, and they will forever be indebted to you as a business owner. And when they can't do it, and when they don't want to do that oil change themselves because they have financial security, they will come to you versus the next guy down the street who they don't know. So I think you're absolutely right. It's a great time to rethink your brand. You don't have to go and do a whole new logo and, like, you know, do anything crazy, but you can definitely tweak things here and there to make sure that you're being seen, and that when this is all over, you have a side component to your business. Just like your facialist lady. Now, when things go back to normal, she's going to do her regular services, and she also has the side business of providing at home, you know, facial kits. That's amazing.
Yeah. And your reach becomes farther too, because now you can ship out of state and, you know, far away, where normally maybe you would just service the local community. So that's also sort of an interesting part of it.
I think that does it. We've kind of talked about everything and anything. I have placed Natela's contact information in the Facebook comment section or description section. So if you need to reach out to her, you have her email as well as her office number. So feel free to reach out to Natela if you feel that you can use her services. Feel free to reach out to me if you're my client and you have some questions related to your estate plan, or you have some other issues and other needs that I can help you with. I think the beauty of all of this, if we can see a positive, is that people have, I feel like, become human again. So we're going to try to keep this momentum going with free information. Next week, we are going to, same time, same place, on Facebook. Facebook Live. My guest is going to be an attorney who will help business owners figure out if they can actually make a claim on their insurance policy and what that entails. And if you have questions along those lines, feel free to message us and ask so we can prepare a question list like we did this week. So next Thursday at 8:30. Thank you so much, Natela, for joining me.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Good night.